The dining table had been set for two. The candles were already lit. The wine still sat untouched. Marcus Blackwood glanced at his watch for the third time. His date was 40 minutes late. No one dared to stand him up. No one dared to forget him. And most certainly, no one dared to make the most powerful mafia boss in the city sit and wait. He was just about to rise and walk away when something small slammed into his leg. He looked down. A little girl, barefoot, hair a tangled mess, her face smeared with mud and tears. With trembling hands, she clutched the hem of his suit vest and stared up at him. "They beat my mom," the child sobbed. "My mom is about to die. Please." The entire Romano's restaurant fell into silence. Marcus lowered himself back into his seat, slowly. His eyes swept across the room. No adult came rushing after her. No shouting. No frantic voices. Only a 6-year-old child who had run until she had nothing left. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice so calm it turned cold. The little girl pointed toward the dark street outside. "They said if my mom keeps screaming, they will come back and take me." And in that moment, Marcus Blackwood understood a terrible truth. His date had not missed him. She had never had the chance to arrive. And whoever had hurt her had just made the deadliest mistake of their life. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what Marcus discovers when he follows that little girl will turn a simple blind date into a night the entire city will never forget. Before we begin, press like if you love stories that reach straight into the heart. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the stories that come next. Now, let us begin. Marcus slowly sank to his knees, lowering himself until his eyes were level with the child's. It was something he had never done in front of anyone. The most powerful mafia boss in the city never bowed his head, never lowered himself. But right now, in front of a 6-year-old girl trembling like a leaf in a storm, he forgot who he was. He saw only a child who needed help. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice gentler than it had ever been in all 37 years of his life. The little girl swallowed her tears, trying to speak through the choking hiccups. Grace Lawson." Marcus nodded slowly, forcing his face to stay calm, even though something inside him was boiling over. "Grace, I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Can you do that?" Grace's big, round eyes looked at him, full of fear and full of hope. She nodded and began to speak, her voice trembling like a fragile thread about to snap. "My mom was getting ready to go on a date tonight. She was so happy. I have never seen her that happy." Grace drew in a deep breath, as if she were trying to hold on to the last beautiful picture of her mother before everything collapsed. She wore a blue dress, her prettiest dress. She said it was the dress my grandmother left behind. She only wore it on special occasions. She fixed her hair really nice, put on lipstick, and then she asked me if she looked pretty. Grace's voice suddenly caught. I told her she looked like a princess. Her mother smiled. She had not smiled like that in a long time. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He did not know who this woman was, but through a child's words, he could see her anyway. A single mother, trying to find one small piece of happiness inside a hard life. "Then what happened, Grace?" Then someone knocked on the door. Grace went on, her small hands gripping the edge of Marcus's vest as if it were the only life raft left in the world. "Mom thought the babysitter was here." She opened the door, but it was not the babysitter. It was some men. They shoved her down. They came inside. They were yelling so loud. Grace's eyes widened, lit with a horror no child should ever have to carry. Mom screamed for me to run. She told me to hide in the closet and not come out no matter what I heard. I ran to my room, climbed into the closet, and shut the door. I heard hitting. I heard my mom crying. I heard my mom screaming. Grace's voice sank, almost a whisper. Then my mom did not scream anymore. Silence. I was so scared. I did not know if she was still alive. Tears streamed down the little girl's dirt-smeared cheeks. I stayed in the closet for a long time. A long time. I heard them going through our stuff. Then they left. I waited a little longer. Then I climbed out the window and climbed down using the tree, the way my mom taught me. Mom said if bad people ever came, I had to run to Romano's restaurant, find an adult, get help. Marcus looked at Grace's bare feet, covered in scrapes and dried blood. How far had she run? How many dark, freezing streets had she crossed? Alone. "How did you get here?" Marcus asked, his voice rough now, thick with something he could not quite name. "I ran," Grace said simply. "I do not know the way. I just remembered Mom said the restaurant's name was Romano, and there was a yellow light by the door. So I kept running, asking people. Some people told me where to go. Some people would not even look at me. I fell a few times, but I got up. I had to find someone to save my mom." Marcus Blackwood had heard countless lies in his life. He could spot a fake from the way someone blinked, from the way they hesitated, from the way their voice rose when they were hiding something. But what stood in front of him now was the truth. Pure. Brutal. A 6-year-old child had run through the night for one reason only, to save her mother. And that mother, that woman in the blue dress, the woman lying somewhere in a pool of blood, was the very person who should have been sitting across from him tonight. A blue dress. A date. Those words echoed in Marcus's mind like an alarm bell. He remembered the phone call with Victoria 3 days earlier. His sister had described the woman she wanted to set him up with. Sarah Lawson, 27 years old, a widow, raising her 6-year-old daughter alone. She will wear a blue dress, Marcus, Victoria had said. It is the most special dress she owns. You will recognize it right away. The blood in Marcus's veins seemed to turn to ice. The woman lying somewhere in a pool of blood was not a stranger. It was Sarah Lawson, the woman he had been waiting for those 40 minutes. The woman he had almost walked out on, thinking she had simply stood him up. The woman who, right now, might be dying in some miserable apartment somewhere in the city. You are a Lawson, right? Marcus asked, his voice dropping lower. Grace nodded, her eyes still shining with tears. Yes, Grace Lawson. My mom's name is Sarah. Every piece clicked into place, cruel and perfect. Marcus rose to his feet and turned toward the bar, where Rosa Benedetti stood. She was the owner's wife, a woman of 62, with silver hair and hands worn rough by years of work. She had known Marcus since he was 10 years old, coming here with his father for dinner. She was one of the few people in this world Marcus truly trusted. Rosa, he called, his voice brief, but not cold. Rosa hurried over at once, worry filling her eyes as she looked at the child beside him. I need you to take care of this little one. Feed her. Wash her feet. Do not let her out of your sight. Rosa nodded without a second of hesitation. She will be safe with me. Marcus, you go. Marcus dropped to one knee again, bringing himself to Grace's level. His eyes, ice cold in front of enemies, softened as they met the girl's tear-filled stare. Grace, I am going to save your mom, but you have to stay here with Rosa. She will look after you. Do you understand? Grace grabbed his sleeve, her voice shaking. You promise? You promise you will save my mom? Marcus looked straight into her eyes, the eyes of a child who had lost her innocence too soon. The eyes searching for an adult she could trust in a world that had betrayed her too many times. I promise, he said, his voice hard as steel, and Marcus Blackwood never broke a promise. Grace slowly let go, letting Rosa lead her away. She looked back one last time, fear and hope tangled together in her gaze, before she disappeared through the kitchen door. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. The call rang once before someone answered. Leo Ricci's voice came through, his most loyal second in command. Boss? Leo, get the team together. 10 minutes. Bring everything. What is it? Someone just made the biggest mistake of their life. I will explain on the way. Marcus ended the call and strode toward the entrance. The diners inside the restaurant hurried to lower their heads, avoiding his eyes. They could feel the change in the air. The man who had been sitting patiently, waiting for a date, was gone. In his place stood the Mafia boss the entire city feared. Outside, the cold night wind cut across Marcus's face. He stood on the sidewalk, staring toward the dark street Grace had pointed to. Somewhere in the maze of alleys and old buildings, a woman was waiting to be rescued. A woman he had never met, yet who had already become his responsibility. A woman someone had dared to hurt, just to send him a message. And that was their fatal mistake. Because Marcus Blackwood was not the kind of man who let provocation slide. He was the kind of man who made enemies regret they had ever been born. His eyes turned to ice as 3 black SUVs swung around the corner and surged toward him. Tragedy came crashing down on an autumn afternoon, when Grace had just turned 3. Sarah was feeding her daughter lunch when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was cold, flat, without feeling. There has been an accident at the construction site. The scaffolding collapsed. Michael Lawson did not make it. Sarah could not remember what she did after that call. She only remembered her legs giving out beneath her. She remembered Grace's terrified voice, calling, Mommy, Mommy. She remembered the sensation of someone pushing her down to the bottom of the ocean, and then forgetting to pull her back up. Michael's funeral was as bleak as his life had been. Only Sarah, Grace, and a few co-workers came to pay their respects. No parents, no brothers or sisters. Michael had been an orphan too, just like her. They had found each other in this world, 2 people with no one, and they had leaned on each other to survive. And now Sarah was alone again. The construction company refused to compensate her. They blamed Michael, saying he had not followed safety rules. They had good lawyers. Sarah had nothing except a mountain of bills, and a 3-year-old daughter asking why Daddy was not coming home. She tried to fight. She knocked on every office door, called every number, wrote every petition, but the poor have no voice in this world. The poor only learn to lower their heads and keep living. Her savings were gone after 2 months. Sarah had to move into a cheaper apartment, then cheaper again, until she and Grace were living in a filthy room in a neighborhood where no one dared to go outside at night. The walls were cracked. Roaches crawled everywhere. The neighbors were addicts and dealers, but it was the only place Sarah could afford. She began working 2 jobs. During the day, she was a cashier at a supermarket, standing for 8 straight hours, scanning items, counting change, smiling at customers even when her legs ached and her head felt like it might split open. At night, she waited tables at a small restaurant, carrying trays, cleaning up, enduring drunk customers who harassed her. By the time she got home, it was usually past midnight. Grace was left with an elderly neighbor, the only kind person in that hell of a neighborhood. But even she could not help for free. Sarah had to pay, even if it was only a little. Every coin was calculated down to the smallest detail. Rent, electricity, water, milk for Grace, medicine when the little girl got sick. And by the end of the month, there was usually not enough left for Sarah to eat. She learned how to be hungry. In the morning, she drank only a glass of plain water. At noon, she ate half a piece of bread. At night, she gave her portion of rice to her daughter. She grew thin, hollowed out, cheekbones sharp, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. But every night, when Grace wrapped her arms around her and said, "I love you, Mommy," Sarah knew she had to keep going. She did not have the right to collapse. She was the only thing Grace had left in this world. 3 years passed like a living hell. 3 years in which Sarah did not buy herself a single new outfit. 3 years in which she did not go to a salon, cutting her own hair with scissors in the bathroom instead. 3 years in which she forgot what it felt like to sleep a full night. 3 years in which she had no friend to confide in, no one to lean on when she was exhausted, no one to ask if she was okay. Sometimes, late at night, when Grace was asleep, Sarah would sit by the window and look out at the city and wonder what this life meant. She was tired, worn down to the bone. She wanted to close her eyes and never have to wake up tomorrow. But then Grace would shift in her sleep, her mouth whispering for Mommy, and Sarah would know she could not quit. She was a mother, and a mother was not allowed to fall. Then Victoria appeared. Victoria Blackwood was a regular at the restaurant where Sarah worked every night. She was 32, beautiful, polished, with glossy black hair and eyes so sharp they seemed to see straight through a person's soul. Victoria usually came alone. She would sit in a quiet corner, order a glass of wine, and read a book. She always left a generous tip, something rare among wealthy guests, and she always smiled at Sarah. Not with that cold, practiced smile of polite society, but with the sincere smile of someone who truly saw her. One night, when the restaurant had emptied out, Victoria called Sarah over to her table. "How long have you been working here?" 3 years, ma'am," Sarah answered, a little surprised by the question. Victoria studied her closely, as if weighing something in her mind. "You have a small child, do you not? I see you looking at the clock near the end of your shift, like you are worried about someone at home." Sarah swallowed, unsure how to respond. "Yes, my daughter is 6. Victoria nodded. She was quiet for a moment, then continued. "You know, I have been watching you for 3 years. You are exhausted. You are thin. You work as if tomorrow does not exist. But you never complain. You never snap. You never let your exhaustion change the way you treat customers." Sarah did not know what to say. She only stood there, gripping her serving tray, waiting. "I have a brother," Victoria went on. "He is 37, unmarried, and lonelier than he will ever admit. He needs a strong woman, someone who will not be overwhelmed by the life he is living. I think you are that person." Sarah nearly dropped the tray. Her? A poor single mother, waiting tables, being set up with the brother of a woman as elegant as Victoria. What kind of joke was that? "I do not think I am right for him," Sarah stammered. "I have nothing. No money. No status. I am just a server." Victoria smiled, her gaze softening. "That is exactly why I chose you. My brother meets too many women who want his money, who want his power. He needs someone real. Someone who does not care about those things. Someone who sees the man he is." Sarah said no the first time, and the second, and the third. But Victoria was persistent. Every week she came, and every week she asked, until one night, Sarah came home and found Grace crying from hunger, and the refrigerator held only a single egg. And suddenly Sarah wondered what she was trying to prove. She had been alone for too long. She had been strong for too long. Maybe, just once, she could allow herself to hope. She agreed to meet Marcus Blackwood, And that was how Sarah stood in front of the mirror on that fateful evening, wearing the only blue dress she owned. The dress did not belong to her. It was her mother's wedding dress, the one thing left with her in that cardboard box long ago. The dress was old. The fabric had worn thin in places, but it was still beautiful. A classic, elegant kind of beauty, as if it carried the spirit of the woman who had given birth to her and then left her behind. "Mommy, you are so pretty," Grace's voice came from behind her. Sarah turned and saw her daughter standing in the doorway, eyes wide and shining. Grace ran over, climbed onto the bed, stood behind her mother, and began to comb her hair. "Let me do your hair, okay? My teacher taught me how to braid yesterday." Sarah sat still, letting her daughter fuss with her hair. Those tiny hands were clumsy, tugging hard enough to sting her scalp a few times. But Sarah did not mind at all. She closed her eyes and let herself sink into this rare moment of peace. "All done," Grace cried out, proud and bright. "Look, you are a princess." Sarah opened her eyes and looked into the mirror. Her hair was braided off to one side, uneven, not pretty by ordinary standards, but it was her daughter's masterpiece. And to Sarah, nothing in the world was more beautiful than that. "I love you," Sarah whispered, pulling Grace tight against her. For the first time in 3 years, something warm stirred in her chest. Hope. A small, fragile hope that maybe her life could change, that maybe tonight would be the beginning of something good. She did not know that only minutes later, hell would knock on her door. 7:30 in the evening. Sarah stood in front of the mirror one last time, checking everything again. The blue dress clung to her thin frame, yet it still lifted up a beauty 3 years of hardship could not erase. The braid Grace had done, clumsy and uneven, lay neatly over her shoulder. A touch of lipstick, a touch of blush, things she had not used since Michael died. Her heart was beating fast, not from fear, from anticipation. How long had it been since she felt this way? 3 years. 4. She could not remember anymore. She only knew that tonight she would step out of this miserable apartment, go to an elegant restaurant, and meet a man Victoria said would change her life. Maybe it was only a fantasy. Maybe nothing would come of it. But at least tonight, she was allowed to dream. "Mommy, someone is knocking." Grace's voice came from the living room. Sarah smiled. It had to be Mrs. Thompson, the kind elderly neighbor who had agreed to watch Grace tonight. She quickly checked her hair once more and walked out. "Let Mommy open the door." "Sweetheart," she said to Grace, standing near the entrance. "Go to your room and get your doll. Then you can go next door to Mrs. Thompson's in a minute." Grace squealed happily and ran to her room. Sarah stepped to the door, turned the lock, her mind still drifting to the evening ahead. What would she say when she met Marcus Blackwood? Should she tell him about Grace right away? Should she talk about Michael? Those thoughts vanished the instant she opened the door. It was not Mrs. Thompson. 3 men stood there. One was tall, his hair cut close, an aluminum baseball bat gleaming in his hand. One was shorter, his face full of scars, his hand shoved into his jacket pocket like he was gripping something there. And the third stood behind them, heavy set, with eyes as cold as dead fish. "Sarah Lawson," the man with the bat asked, his voice carrying a vicious smile. Before Sarah could answer, before she could slam the door shut, he shoved it hard. Sarah stumbled backward, her back striking the wall. The 3 men rushed in and slammed the door behind them. The tiny apartment suddenly felt cramped and airless with their presence. "Who are you?" Sarah shouted, her voice trembling. "What do you want?" "I do not have any money." The man with the bat stepped closer. He looked Sarah up and down, his gaze stopping on her blue dress. "Nice dress. Going on a date." Sarah did not answer. She was trying to think, trying to find a way out, trying to protect Grace. Her daughter was in the bedroom, only a few steps away. If they found out Grace was here, the man seemed to read her thoughts. He laughed, a sound that turned Sarah's blood to ice. "My name is Danny Webb. Someone sends their regards to your new boyfriend." New boyfriend? Sarah did not understand. She had never met Marcus Blackwood. She did not even know what he looked like. Why would anyone want to hurt her over a date that had not even happened? "You have the wrong person," she shouted. "I do not know what you are talking about." Danny Webb shrugged. "Maybe you do not know, but my boss knows very well, and he wants to send a message." He lifted the baseball bat. Sarah screamed, not because of the blow about to fall, but because she heard tiny footsteps from the bedroom. Grace was running out. "Grace, hide. Go back to your room. Do not come out." Sarah roared with every shred of strength she had left. The first blow crashed into her shoulder, pain like bone shattering into pieces. But Sarah did not cry out. She clamped her lips so hard they bled, swallowing the scream in her throat. She could not scream. If she screamed, Grace would come out, and they would see her. The second blow struck her ribs. The third landed across her back. Sarah fell to the floor, curling in on herself, both arms over her head. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead, staining her mother's blue dress a deep red. But still she did not cry out. She thought of Grace, her daughter, the only child she had in this world. She had to stay silent. She had to let Grace hide. Danny Webb stood over her, the bat raised high. "Tell your new boyfriend this is a warning. Next time will not be as gentle as this." The final blow came down on Sarah's head, and everything fell into darkness. Grace heard everything. From inside the cramped, pitch-dark closet, she heard it all. Her mother shouting for her to hide, the front door slamming, the heavy footsteps of strangers, the impact, the sound of flesh meeting something hard, and her mother's strangled, broken moans. Grace pressed both hands over her mouth, fighting to keep a sob from slipping out. Tears soaked her palms, but she did not dare make a sound. Mom had warned her. Mom had told her not to come out, no matter what she heard. And Grace was a good girl. Grace always listened to her mother. The beating went on. Once, twice, 3 times. Each crack of impact felt like a knife driven into her small heart. She wanted to run out. She wanted to push those bad men away. She wanted to protect her mother. But she was only a 6-year-old child. She could not do anything. All she could do was sit in the dark, shaking, and pray. Then, suddenly, silence. The blows stopped. Her mother's moans stopped too. Only footsteps remained. The sound of drawers being yanked open, things being tossed around, the low scoff of strangers. That silence was more terrifying than screaming, because when her mother was screaming, it meant she was still alive. And now, Grace did not know. She wanted to call for her mother. She wanted to scream, but her throat felt crushed. Not a sound would come. The front door opened, then closed. Footsteps faded away, then nothing at all. Grace did not know how long she stayed inside that closet. Maybe minutes, maybe an hour. She was too frightened to count. At last, when she was sure the bad men were gone, she dared to push the closet door open. The bedroom was dark. The light in the living room was still on, throwing a thin stripe through the crack in the door. Grace stepped out, her legs trembling so badly she could barely stand. She wanted to run out. She wanted to see if her mother was okay, but she remembered what her mother had told her. Over and over. If something bad happens, you climb out the window. You climb down the tree outside the balcony. Then you run to Romano's restaurant. The restaurant has a yellow light by the door. There is a kind woman there named Rosa. You find an adult to help you. Do not trust anyone on the way. Only trust the people inside Romano's. Grace swallowed her tears, forcing herself to remember every word her mother had taught her. She went to the bedroom window and opened it. The night wind blew in, sharp and freezing, making her small body tremble. But she did not stop. She climbed over the sill and reached for the branch outside. The bark scraped her skin, stinging and raw, but Grace clenched her teeth and held on. She lowered herself down inch by inch, the way her mother had made her practice whenever there was time. When her feet hit the ground, Grace realized she was not wearing shoes. Her sandals were still in the living room, where her mother might be lying motionless, but she could not go back. She had to find someone to save her mother. So Grace began to run. Her bare feet slapped the icy sidewalk. Pebbles stabbed into her skin. Broken glass sliced into her soles. Blood came, but Grace did not stop. She did not know the way. She only remembered her mother saying Romano's was about 8 blocks from home, in the direction where the lights were brighter. So she ran toward the light. The streets at night were more frightening than anything Grace had ever imagined. Strange figures passed her, staring at the barefoot little girl racing through the darkness with looks she did not understand. Someone asked if she was okay, but Grace did not stop. Mom had said not to trust anyone on the way. She tripped. Her knees slammed into the concrete, blood rising to the surface. It burned. It hurt. But Grace got back up. She was not allowed to stop. Her mother was waiting. 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks. Grace stopped counting. She just ran. She ran until her lungs felt ready to burst. She ran until her feet went numb. She ran until she saw the warm yellow light and the familiar sign. Romano. She burst into the restaurant, crashed straight into the leg of a man who was rising from his seat, ready to leave. And when she looked up into his eyes, cold but not cruel, Grace knew she had found the right person. 3 black SUVs swung around the corner like hunting beasts in the night. They stopped in front of Romano's with the precision of a well-trained unit. The doors opened. 7 men stepped out. At the front was Leo Ricci, Marcus's right hand. Leo was 40, tall and broad, with salt and pepper, hair and eyes sharp as a razor. A long scar ran from his temple down to his chin, a souvenir from a fight he never spoke about. Behind Leo came Marco and Luca, the 2 most reliable shooters in the organization. Marco was as silent as darkness, a man of few words. But when he spoke, every syllable carried the weight of a bullet. Luca was the opposite. Quick, alert, clever, able to read a situation in a flash. The other four were seasoned fighters, each carrying a past no one wanted to ask about, and a future only Marcus could decide. Marcus stepped toward Leo. Their eyes met for a brief moment, but it was enough to say everything. "Boss, what is the situation?" Leo asked, his voice low and steady. "Someone attacked a woman, the woman who was supposed to be my date tonight. She is somewhere in this city, maybe bleeding, maybe dying. We have to find her." Leo nodded, asking nothing more. He did not need to know why Marcus cared about a woman the boss had never met. He only needed to know what Marcus wanted, and he would do whatever it took to make it happen. That was how Leo Ricci had lived for the past 10 years. 10 years earlier, Leo had been a small-time criminal, trying to survive in a brutal underworld. That night, he had happened to be there when a rival crew ambushed Marcus in a dark alley. Marcus was only 27 then, young, inexperienced, backed into a corner with the last bullet in his gun. Leo did not know who Marcus was. He only saw a man about to be killed by 5 cowards. So he stepped in. They fought together, back to back, until the 5 attackers lay still on the ground. When it was over, Marcus looked at Leo and asked a simple question. "What do you want?" Leo answered, "A reason to live." From that moment on, Leo never left Marcus's side. Not for money, not for power, but because Marcus had given him something no one else ever had. To respect. "The address," Marcus said, pulling Leo out of the memory. "Apartment 42, Greenfield Building, Maple Street, West Side. Marco, Luca, you two take the fire stairs. Leo, you are with me through the front door. The rest of you, hold the outside. No one in, no one out, not without my order." All 7 men nodded at once. They knew the rules. They knew what failure cost. And they knew that when Marcus Blackwood gave an order, there was no room for mistakes. They got back into the vehicles. The 3 SUVs cut into the night like bullets racing for a target. Inside the car, Marcus stared out the window as the city slid past like a river of blurred light. He had lived 37 years. He had built an empire with his bare hands. He had made an entire city fear the name Marcus Blackwood. But never, not once, had he felt like this. For the first time in many years, he had something to lose. Not money. Money could be earned again. Not power. Power could be rebuilt. But a person. A woman he had never met, yet who had become his responsibility. A 6-year-old child who had placed all her trust in him after only minutes. They did not know who he was. They did not know what he had done. They only knew he was the only one who could save them. And Marcus would not betray that trust. The SUV turned onto Maple Street, and Marcus tightened his grip on the door handle. No matter the cost, he would bring Sarah Lawson back safe. The 3 SUVs came to a stop at the end of Maple Street, about 50 meters from the Greenfield Building. Marcus stepped out, and the first thing he noticed was the poverty that clung to this neighborhood like a second skin. This was not a place where an ordinary person chose to live. This was where people ended up when they had no other choices left. Old buildings stood shoulder to shoulder like dried-out bones. Brick walls were cracked and blotched with damp stains. Many apartment windows were covered with cardboard or plastic bags instead of glass. The streetlights flickered. Some had been dead for a long time, leaving patches of darkness as thick as ink. The stench of garbage and sewer water rose sharp in the night air. Sarah Lawson had lived here for 3 years, raising her daughter alone, working 2 jobs, enduring poverty, hardship, hunger, and when she finally allowed herself to hope for something better, hell had come knocking. Marcus clenched his jaw, anger rolling hotter in his chest. The Greenfield Building stood in the middle of the block, 4 stories tall, with a rusty iron fire escape running along its side. Marcus studied it carefully. Apartment 42 was on the 2nd floor. The window was still lit. Someone was still inside. "Leo, look at that." Marcus pointed toward a black sedan parked across the street. That car did not belong in this neighborhood. It was too new, too clean, too expensive compared to the wrecks around it. And more importantly, the engine was still warm. In the cold air, Marcus could see a faint breath of steam lifting from the hood. "They are still here," Leo said, his voice low and dangerous. "Good." Marcus pulled out his gun and checked the magazine. "At least we do not have to search." "Luca, the fire escape." "Marco, watch the street. No one in, no one out. You two, with me and Leo through the front door." The men moved in silence, each taking position like ghosts in the night. Marcus and Leo headed for the building's main entrance, their footsteps making no sound at all. The front door had no lock. It was not even fully shut, only half closed, as if inviting strangers to walk right in. Marcus pushed it open and stepped into the dark hallway. The smell, that was the first thing that hit him. Blood, raw and metallic, thick in the air. Mixed with the moldy damp of the old building, it became something that made his stomach tighten. Marcus had smelled blood many times in his life. He knew the scent of death, and this smell was telling him something terrible had happened upstairs. The old wooden stairs creaked under each step, but Marcus no longer cared about staying quiet. If they were still up there, they would know he was coming, and he wanted them to know. He wanted them afraid. On the second floor, Marcus stopped in front of apartment 42. The door had been broken. The wood around the lock was splintered, like someone had kicked straight through it. A clear sign of forced entry. Violence. No attempt to hide. No shame. They wanted to be seen. They wanted their message delivered. Through the crack of the half-open door, Marcus could hear movement inside. Footsteps. Furniture being shifted. Low voices. At least 2 men. Leo stood behind him, gun ready, waiting for the signal. Marcus drew in a deep breath. On the outside, he was ice without feeling. Cold, calculating, dangerous. But deep in his chest, something was gnawing at him. Fear. Not fear of the men inside. Marcus did not fear anyone. Fear of what he might find. Sarah Lawson might already be dead. The woman he had never met. The woman whose 6-year-old daughter had run through the night to beg him for help might no longer be breathing. And if that was true, Marcus did not know what he would do. He did not know if the fury inside him could be contained. He pushed the door open and stepped into the apartment, ready to face whatever was waiting inside. The apartment looked like a battlefield. Furniture had been overturned, scattered everywhere. The small wooden table where Sarah and Grace had probably eaten dinner together now had a leg kicked clean off, lying useless in the middle of the room. A chair had been flung into the corner. Dishes lay shattered across the floor. And blood. Blood was everywhere. On the floor, on the walls, on the old, worn rug that had once tried to hide how broken this place really was. Marcus stepped inside, his eyes moving fast over the wreckage. 2 men stood in the living room, digging through the mess as if they were hunting for something valuable. One of them was tall, hair cut short, a baseball bat still in his hand. The bat was smeared with blood. Danny Webb. The other was shorter, his face carved with scars, checking drawers in an old dresser. And on the floor, only a few steps from them, Sarah Lawson lay motionless. Her blue dress had turned red. The braid Grace had made for her was now a tangled ruin, matted with blood. Her face was turned toward the doorway, eyes shut tight, her body unmoving. Marcus could not tell whether she was still breathing. His heart tightened as if someone had wrapped a fist around it, but his face stayed like ice. Not a flicker of emotion showed. Danny Webb looked up at the sound of footsteps. He saw Marcus in the doorway, and a slow smile spread across his rough features. "Blackwood," he said, as if greeting an old acquaintance. "Right on time. I was betting Tony here on how long it would take you to find your way over. Looks like I won." Tony, the scar-faced man, turned to look at Marcus. His hand slipped from the drawer and went to the gun tucked in his waistband. But he did not draw it. He knew the rules. Pulling a gun in front of Marcus Blackwood, without being sure you were faster, was suicide. Marcus walked deeper into the apartment, Leo close behind him. He did not look at the criminals. He looked at Sarah, at her still body, at the widening pool of blood beneath her. "Is she alive?" Marcus asked, his voice calm in a way that was terrifying, as if he were asking about the weather, not the life of a human being. Danny shrugged. "Probably. We were told not to kill her, just teach her a lesson." "A lesson about what?" Marcus asked. "About choosing the wrong man," Danny sneered. "My boss says you are getting soft, Blackwood. He says you are letting women distract you. He wants to remind you that in this world, feelings are a deadly weakness." Marcus did not move. He did not react. But behind him, Leo's grip tightened on his gun until his knuckles went white. "Frank Moretti," Marcus said slowly, as if tasting each word. "He sent you here. To beat an innocent woman. To send me a message." "That is right." Danny spun the baseball bat in his hand, smugness written all over his face. "The boss wants you to know nobody touches what belongs to Frank Moretti without paying for it. You have been eyeing territory on the east side. You have been leaning on some of his business partners. You thought he would just sit there and take it. No." He hit back. "And this is the first warning." Marcus was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice dropped low, like thunder rolling in before a storm. "You have it wrong." Danny lifted an eyebrow. "Wrong about what?" "Wrong to think she belongs to anyone." Marcus took one step forward, and both Danny and Tony backed up without meaning to. "Sarah Lawson is not mine. She is not Frank Moretti's. She does not belong to anyone. She is a mother trying to raise her child. She is a woman trying to survive one day at a time. She has nothing to do with the war between me and Frank. And yet you beat her. Marcus took another step. You beat an innocent woman to send a message. You made a 6-year-old child run barefoot across the city in the dark to find someone to save her mother. Danny stopped smiling. Something in him began to understand that something was wrong. Marcus Blackwood was not reacting the way Danny had expected. No panic. No wild, uncontrolled rage. Only calm. A calm more frightening than any fury. Frank Moretti thinks he is teaching me a lesson, Marcus said, his voice cold as ice. But tonight, I am the one teaching, and the first lesson is this. Anyone who harms the innocent will pay. No exceptions. Everything happened in a blink. Tony, the scar-faced man, drew his gun. Maybe he thought he was fast enough. Maybe he thought Marcus was distracted. He was wrong. Leo was faster. The gunshot exploded inside the tiny apartment, deafening. Before Tony could swing the barrel toward Marcus, Leo's bullet tore through his shoulder. Tony screamed. The gun slipped from his hand. He collapsed onto the floor, clutching the wound as blood poured out. Danny Webb reacted on instinct. He lifted the baseball bat, ready to bring it down on Marcus. But Marcus gave him no chance. He stepped in, grabbed Danny's wrist, and twisted hard. Bone cracked. Danny screamed in pain. The bat clattered to the floor with a cold, metallic ring. Marcus slammed Danny against the wall. One hand locked around Danny's throat. The other pressed the muzzle of a gun to his temple. Only inches separated them. Danny could see every vein in Marcus's eyes, and what he saw there made him tremble down to the bone. Do not kill me, Danny stammered, his voice stripped of the smugness it had carried seconds earlier. I was only following orders. I have kids. I have 2 kids. Please. Marcus said nothing. He only stared at Danny with eyes cold as ice. In his mind, Grace appeared, a 6-year-old child, barefoot, running through the night, eyes full of tears, a trembling voice begging him to save her mother. She has a child too, Marcus said, his voice low, thunder in the distance. A 6-year-old daughter, a child who had to hide in a closet and listen to her mother being beaten, a child who had to run barefoot across the city in the cold, dark night. Did that stop you? Danny did not answer. He could not. He knew anything he said would only make it worse. Marcus tightened his grip, cutting off Danny's breath. Danny thrashed, face turning purple, eyes bulging. For a moment, Marcus wanted to crush his throat, to end the miserable life of the man who had dared to touch the innocent. Then he stopped. Not from mercy. Marcus Blackwood did not pity enemies, but because he needed Danny Webb alive. Marcus released him, and Danny dropped to the floor, coughing, choking, gasping for air. You will live, Marcus said coldly. Not because you deserve it, but because I need you to carry a message back to Frank Moretti. Danny lifted his head, eyes still wide with fear. What message? Tell him, Marcus Blackwood received his message. And tonight, I am coming in person to deliver my reply. Marcus turned his back and walked toward Sierra. Leo stayed where he was, watching the 2 men, gun leveled at them, ready to fire if either one moved. Marcus knelt beside Sarah, his heart pounding hard in his chest. Up close, he could see what they had done to her. Her face was swollen and bruised. Her left eye was nearly shut. Her lip was split. Dried blood crusted there, but her chest was still rising and falling, faintly, slowly, but clearly. She was alive. Sarah, he said softly, his voice gentler than it had ever been in all 37 years of his life. Sarah, can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered. A small, painful sound escaped her. Then, slowly, she opened her eyes. Only one eye could open. The other was too swollen. But it was enough. Enough for Marcus to know she was still here, still fighting. Grace. That was the first word that slipped past her cracked lips. Not a question about herself. Not a question about the men who hurt her. Her daughter. My daughter. Grace. Where is Grace? She is safe, Marcus said, and something strange tightened in his throat. She is at Romano's with Rosa. She is okay. Sarah closed her eyes, and tears began to slide down her bruised cheeks. Not tears of pain, tears of relief. Relief that her daughter was safe. Relief that Grace had found help. Relief that she had not lost the most precious thing in her life. She saved you, Sarah, Marcus said, and his voice carried a respect he rarely gave anyone. She ran across the city in the dark to find help. She is very brave. Sarah's lips moved, trying to say something, but her strength was gone. She only gave a small nod, and her eyes slowly drifted closed again. Marcus turned to Leo. Call an ambulance. And call Dr. Cole. Tell him to get to St. Mary's Hospital right now. Leo nodded and pulled out his phone. Marcus looked down at Sarah, the woman he had never met, yet who had become his responsibility. He gently took her cold hand and held it tight. "You will be okay," he whispered, not sure if he was speaking to her or to himself. "I promise, you will be okay." The wail of the ambulance siren tore through the quiet night. Red and blue lights flashed, reflecting off the worn walls of the Greenfield building, turning everything into something chaotic and unreal. 2 paramedics rushed into the apartment with a stretcher, and within minutes, Sarah was lifted onto it. A brace stabilized her neck. An oxygen mask covered her nose and mouth. Almost at the same time, a black Mercedes rolled up hard in front of the building. Dr. Nathan Cole stepped out, a medical bag in his hand, his face drawn tight with urgency. He was 45, graying at the temples, Marcus's private physician for the past 10 years. He did not ask what happened. He did not need to. In Marcus Blackwood's world, there were questions better left unspoken. Dr. Cole examined Sarah right there on the stretcher, his practiced hands moving over each injury. "Mild head trauma," he told Marcus, professional and steady. 3 broken ribs, possibly 4, multiple bruises and lacerations. Significant blood loss, but not life-threatening. She needs to go to the hospital now for a CT scan and monitoring, but if there are no complications, she will recover. Marcus nodded, a quiet breath of relief leaving him even though his face showed nothing. She would live. That was all he needed to know right now. "Take her to St. Mary's," he ordered. "Dr. Cole, ride with the ambulance. Make sure she gets the best care. I will cover the cost." Dr. Cole nodded and climbed into the ambulance with the paramedics. But before the doors could close, a weak hand reached out and caught Marcus by the wrist. Sarah was awake. She looked at him with the one eye she could open, exhausted, but not afraid. "You are Marcus Blackwood," she said, her voice rough through the oxygen mask. It was not a question. It was a statement. Marcus looked at her, surprised. "You know who I am. Victoria told me." Sarah murmured, forcing the words out even though each one sounded like a blade scraping across her swollen throat. "She said you are a Mafia boss. She said you are dangerous. She also said you are the best man she knows." Marcus went silent. He did not know what to do with those words. All his life, people either feared him or tried to use him. No one had ever called him a good man. "I am not afraid of you," Sarah continued. Her hand tightened around his wrist, as if she needed him to understand something important. "I know who you are. I know what world you live in, but I am not afraid." "You should be," Marcus said, his voice low and honest. "My life is not safe. The people around me are not safe. Tonight is proof." Sarah shook her head slightly, the motion painful, but her will unbroken. "Tonight is not your fault. Tonight is the fault of men who chose violence." She drew a careful breath, then continued, "I am asking you for one thing." Marcus leaned closer. "What is it?" "Come back." Sarah's gaze held his, earnest and pleading. "I know you will go after the men who did this. I know you will not let it go. But whatever you do, come back. Grace needs someone who keeps his promise. That little girl ran across the city in the dark to find someone to save me. She came to you. She trusted you. Please do not betray that trust." Marcus looked into the eyes of the woman in front of him. Eyes swollen, in pain, but not weak. The eyes of a mother who had been through hell, and still thought of her child before herself. "I promise," he said, his voice hard as steel. "I will come back." Sarah managed a small smile on her cracked lips. Then her hand slipped from his wrist as her strength finally ran out. The ambulance doors shut. The siren rose again. The vehicle surged into the night, leaving Marcus alone on the cold sidewalk. He watched the red and blue lights fade farther and farther away, until they were only a small dot, then nothing at all. And he realized something strange. For the first time in all 37 years of his life, someone was worried about whether he would survive. Not for money, not for power, because they truly cared. The feeling was unfamiliar, warm, and more terrifying than any bullet that had ever flown toward him. Marcus returned to Romano's before heading to the Dock Street warehouse. He knew he had to see Grace, had to look at her with his own eyes, had to make sure the child who had placed all her trust in him knew her mother was safe. When he stepped into the restaurant, he saw Grace sitting at a small table near the bar. Rosa had dressed her in a warm sweater, probably one that belonged to her granddaughter. The little girl's feet had been washed and carefully bandaged. In front of Grace sat a bowl of chocolate ice cream, but she only stirred it with her spoon. She did not eat. Her big eyes were still red and swollen, fixed on empty space as if she were searching for something she could not name. When she saw Marcus walk in, Grace lifted her head. Her eyes brightened just a little, hope tangled with fear. She slid off the chair and ran toward him, then stopped a few steps away, as if she could not move closer, afraid of bad news. Marcus walked over and knelt until they were eye level. He had done it twice tonight. something he had never done for anyone in all 37 years of his life. But with Grace, it felt natural. It felt right. "My mom," Grace whispered, her voice shaking. "Is my mom okay?" "Your mom is safe now," Marcus said, his voice gentler than he would have believed possible. "She is at the hospital. The doctors are taking care of her. She is going to get better." Grace's eyes filled, tears spilling down her cheeks, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of relief. The same kind her mother had cried when she learned her child was safe. "Can I see my mom?" Grace asked, barely audible. "Someone will take you to see her soon," Marcus promised. "But right now, I need you to go with my people to a safe place. There will be a warm bed, good food, and no one can hurt you there. Do you understand?" Grace nodded, but her eyes never left Marcus, as if she were trying to understand who he really was. "Are you a police officer?" she asked suddenly. "Only police officers catch bad people." Marcus almost laughed. Almost, because the innocent question of a 6-year-old hit the very thing he had been asking himself for years. Who was he? A good man, or a bad one? Which side of justice did he stand on? "No, sweetheart," Marcus said, shaking his head slightly. "I am not a police officer. I am something else." Grace tilted her head, curious. "Something else like what?" Marcus was silent for a moment, not knowing how to explain the dark world he lived in to a child. "Someone who does the things the police cannot do," he finally said, "to protect the people who need protecting." Grace seemed to accept that. She nodded, then asked, "Will you catch the bad people who hurt my mom?" "I promise," Marcus said, his voice firm. "They will pay for what they did." Grace looked at him for a long time, her big eyes studying something important. Then she spoke, her voice small but clear. "My mom says someone who keeps promises is a good person. My mom says it is rare in this world to find someone like that." She tilted her head, looking straight into Marcus's eyes. "You are a good person, right?" Marcus went still. The simple question from a 6-year-old felt like a knife driven straight into his heart. He had killed people. He had done terrible things. He had lived in the dark for half his life. Did he deserve to be called good? Marcus began, then stopped, and in the end he told the truth. "I am trying, Grace. I am trying to become a good person." Grace smiled, the first smile since she had run into the restaurant earlier that night. "Then you will be a good person. My mom says people who try will succeed." Marcus did not answer. He only reached out and gently stroked Grace's hair, then stood. He called over one of his most trusted people, a middle-aged woman named Maria, who had worked for the Blackwood family since his father was alive. "Take her to the safe house on Elm Street," Marcus ordered. "Feed her, put her to bed, and do not take your eyes off her for even 1 second." Maria nodded and took Grace's hand. Before she left, Grace looked back at Marcus one last time. "Do not forget your promise," she said. Marcus nodded, and when the restaurant door closed behind Grace, he knew he would do anything to keep that promise. 11 at night. The Dock Street warehouse rose in front of Marcus like a sleeping monster in the abandoned harbor. This area had once been the city's thriving trade center a few decades ago, but now it was only a graveyard for dreams that had died. Rust-eaten shipping containers were stacked on one another like enormous tombs. Old cranes stood alone, their steel arms reaching into the night sky as if begging for salvation. The sharp salt of seawater mixed with the stink of engine oil and corroded metal, creating the unmistakable taste of decay. This was Frank Moretti's territory. This was the den he had built over 30 years, and this was the place where he believed he could lure Marcus Blackwood into a trap. Marcus stopped the car about 50 meters from the warehouse. He stepped out alone, exactly as Frank demanded. But alone was only what it looked like. Leo and his team had been in position for 30 minutes already. They were hidden in darkness, on top of tall containers, in blind corners no one ever thought to check. Marcus's best sniper lay on the roof of a collapsed building about 100 meters away, eye fixed to the scope, finger resting on the trigger. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. It rang twice before someone answered. The voice on the other end was rough and old, yet still carried the arrogance of a man who believed he held the advantage. "Blackwood, I am here," Marcus replied, calm. "Alone, as you asked." A dry snort of laughter came through the line. "Good, very good. You are smarter than I thought. Come in. The front door is open." Marcus ended the call and started toward the warehouse. The main entrance was a massive steel door, rusted by years but still strong enough to keep out any unwanted intruder. It stood slightly open, a weak yellow light spilling out like blood from a wound. Marcus stepped inside. The warehouse was larger than he expected. The ceiling soared high overhead, held up by enormous steel pillars. Industrial lamps hung above, casting a pale light that could not fully push back the darkness. and in the center of that vast space, a single wooden table sat under the brightest circle of light. Frank Moretti was seated there. He was 58, but he looked older, as if years spent in the shadows had drained the life from him. Snow-white hair was combed straight back, exposing a gaunt face carved with deep lines. His eyes were cold, like a snake's, without even a trace of feeling. He wore an expensive black suit, as if he were attending an elite party rather than sitting in this filthy warehouse. Around Frank stood 15 gunmen. They were spread throughout the building, weapons in hand, eyes locked on Marcus. Some stood close to Frank's table, like loyal bodyguards. Others stood in dark corners, watching every entrance. They were trying to make a perfect trap. They did not know the trap had been broken a long time ago. Marcus walked to the middle of the warehouse and stopped about 10 steps from Frank's table. He stood tall, his arms hanging at his sides, showing no sign of worry or fear, as if he were standing in his own home, not inside an enemy's lair. "Marcus Blackwood," Frank spoke, his voice echoing through the wide space. "So you finally came. I was starting to think you would disappoint me." "I never disappoint anyone," Marcus answered coldly, "especially not those who dared to lay hands on my people." Frank laughed, dry and without warmth. "Your people." He clicked his tongue. "You know, Blackwood, that is exactly the problem. You are starting to have people, starting to have something to lose. And in our world, that is a fatal weakness. You beat an innocent woman to teach me a lesson about weakness." Frank leaned forward, his lifeless eyes fixed on Marcus. "I beat her so you would understand you are getting soft. You are losing focus. You are letting a woman influence your decisions. And when a mafia boss grows weak, he loses everything." "What do you want, Frank?" Marcus asked, direct, simple. Frank leaned back in his chair, smugness spreading across his wrinkled face. "I want the West. All of your territory on the west side of the city. You step back, hand it over to me, and I will forget what happened tonight. Your girl gets to live. The child gets to live. You get to live. All of us walk away happy." Marcus did not answer right away. He looked at Frank, at the gunmen around him, then back at Frank. "And you think I will agree?" "I think you do not have a choice," Frank replied, his voice cold as ice. "You are standing alone in the middle of 15 guns. You may be dangerous, but you are not a superhero. You accept my terms, or you die here tonight. That is all there is to it." Marcus smiled, a small smile, but it carried something that made Frank feel a sudden chill crawl up his spine. "You know, Frank," Marcus said slowly, "there is one thing you miscalculated." Frank lifted an eyebrow, curiosity threaded with irritation. "Miscalculated? Miscalculated what?" Marcus did not answer right away. He let his gaze travel across the warehouse, as if counting every gunman, every shadowed corner, every possible exit. Then he looked back at Frank, calm in a way that felt almost unnatural. "You think I am in love," Marcus said slowly, "and you think that is weakness?" Frank nodded, smug. "Of course. Love makes people blind. It makes them do stupid things. It makes them put their heart before their mind. In our world, that is the fastest way to die. I have lived 58 years by loving no one, trusting no one, needing no one. And look at me. I am still standing here, while so many others have fallen." Marcus shook his head slightly. "You are wrong, Frank. I am not getting weaker. I have more reason to fight." Frank scoffed. "Reason? What reason? A woman you have never even met. A child who is not your blood. That is your reason." "Yes." Marcus nodded, and his voice dropped lower, carrying something he rarely showed anyone. "You know what, Frank? Tonight I met a child, a 6-year-old girl." Frank said nothing, not understanding where Marcus was going. "She ran across this city in the dark," Marcus continued, "barefoot. No shoes, no warm coat, only a thin dress and those tiny feet. She ran through freezing streets, dangerous slums, corners so dark even grown men would not dare step into them. She fell, got up, and kept running. 8 blocks. Alone. At night." Marcus took one step forward, and even though Frank did not back away, his hand tightened on the arm of his chair. "Do you know why she could do that?" Marcus asked. "Why a 6-year-old could do what so many adults would not dare do?" Frank did not answer. "Because of love," Marcus said, and the respect in his voice ran deep. "She loves her mother, and that love gave her the strength to push past fear, past pain, past everything. She had no gun, no power, no money, but she had love, and tonight, that love saved her mother's life." Marcus looked straight into Frank's eyes, his gaze sharp as steel. "That is not weakness, Frank. That is the strongest thing in the world. And you, a man who has lived 58 years, loving no one, trusting no one, needing no one. You will never understand that." Frank Moretti stared at Marcus, and for the first time that night, a flicker of worry flashed through his cold eyes. Something was wrong. Marcus was too calm, too confident, as if he knew something Frank did not. "You are," Frank started, but Marcus cut him off. "You asked what you miscalculated," Marcus said. He lifted his left hand, slowly, as if checking a watch. "I will tell you. You miscalculated when you thought I came here alone." He snapped his fingers, and hell exploded. The warehouse lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything in an instant. Then gunfire erupted from every direction. From above, where the containers were stacked high. From corners no one thought to watch. From the back entrance Frank's men had left unguarded. Marcus's team surged in like ghosts in the night. Leo led, his weapon spitting fire without pause. Marco and Luca struck from both flanks, dropping Frank's gunmen before they could even react. The sniper on the ruined rooftop joined in, and with each distant crack, another of Frank's men fell. The firefight lasted 47 seconds. 47 seconds of gunshots, screams, bullets tearing into flesh, bodies hitting concrete. And when the lights came back on, the warehouse had become a war zone. Frank's 15 gunmen lay scattered across the floor, some dead, some wounded, none strong enough to lift a weapon anymore. Marcus's men were still standing, carrying only a few minor injuries that did not matter. A complete victory. And Frank Moretti, the 58-year-old boss who had once ruled the east side of the city, was trying to run for the back door. He was almost there when Leo appeared and cut him off. Frank spun, trying another way, but Marcus was already there. Marcus walked forward, step by slow step, gun in hand, eyes never leaving his enemy. "Frank," Marcus said his name, calm as if they were talking in a coffee shop. "Do you know why I am not killing you?" Frank did not answer. He was trembling, sweat beading on his forehead, every trace of arrogance completely gone. "Because death is too easy." Marcus raised his gun and aimed it straight at Frank. "I want you to live. Live to remember tonight. Live to know you gambled against the wrong man. Live to watch your empire collapse, one day at a time." Marcus pulled the trigger. The bullet tore through Frank's right shoulder. Frank screamed and crashed to the floor, clutching the wound as blood poured out. Marcus stepped closer, looming over the defeated enemy. "Tonight, the Moretti Empire officially falls. And you, Frank, will live the rest of your life with the memory of this moment." Then Marcus turned and walked away without looking back. Behind him, Frank Moretti's moans echoed through the empty warehouse, like a funeral hymn for an era that had ended. 3 a.m, St. Mary's Hospital lay under the particular stillness of the hours before dawn. The fluorescent lights in the hallway cast a cold white glow, reflected off polished tile. The faint scent of antiseptic and cleaning solution hung in the air. Now and then, a night nurse's footsteps would echo, then fade back into silence. Marcus stood outside Sierra's room, his hand on the door handle, but he did not turn it. He had faced 15 gunmen in the warehouse without trembling. He had put a bullet through Frank Moretti's shoulder without hesitation. But now, in front of this thin hospital door, he suddenly found he could not step inside. He did not know what to say to her. He did not know how to explain tonight. He did not know whether she even wanted to see him, the man who, because of a single date, had nearly gotten her killed. How long Marcus stood there, he did not know. Maybe seconds, maybe minutes, until a weak voice came from inside. "I know you are standing there." Marcus drew a deep breath, then pushed the door open and stepped in. The room was small, just one bed and a few pieces of medical equipment. Sarah lay there with white bandages around her head. Her face was still swollen and bruised, but her eyes were open. She was looking out the window, where the night sky had begun to take on pale violet streaks, the first hint of dawn. "You kept your promise," Sarah said, her voice rough, but carrying a faint smile. "You came back." Marcus walked to the bedside and pulled a chair closer. He looked at Sarah, the woman he had waited 40 minutes for at Romano's tonight, the woman he had risked everything to save, the woman he had never met before, yet who had become the center of every decision he made through this night. "I always keep my promises," he said. "How is Grace?" Sarah asked at once, her eyes brightening the moment she spoke her daughter's name. "She is sleeping somewhere safe," Marcus reassured her. "Someone is watching her. Tomorrow morning, I will bring her to see you." Sarah let out a breath, as if a weight had been lifted from her chest. "She is not hurt, is she?" "No, only a few scrapes on her feet from running barefoot. But she is okay. She is very brave." Tears slid down Sarah's bruised cheeks. "She is all I have. If anything happened to her." "Nothing happened," Marcus said, gentle but certain. "She is safe. You are safe. It is over now." Sarah turned her head to look at him, eyes blurred with tears, yet still bright. She studied him as if trying to understand who he was. "Why did you do all of this?" she asked. You do not know who I am. I am just a restaurant server. A poor single mother. I have nothing to give you back. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. I do not need you to give me anything. Sarah looked at him, her gaze carrying the exhaustion of someone who had suffered too much for too long. You know, she began, her voice like someone telling an old story. I am an orphan. I grew up in foster care, not knowing who my parents were. When I turned 18, I left with nothing, no one, no place to go. Then I met Michael. She paused, swallowing hard, as if trying to swallow the pain. For the first time in my life, I had a family, someone who loved me, a place to come home to. Then he died, and I was alone again. The tears kept falling, but Sarah did not sob. She had learned to cry silently. I am used to good things leaving me, she whispered. My parents left me. Michael left me. Everything I love goes away. So I stopped allowing myself to hope. Tonight, when Victoria convinced me to go on a date, that was the first time in 3 years I let myself hope. And look what happened. She gave a bitter, broken smile, but it vanished quickly as pain from her broken ribs flared. Maybe I am not allowed to be happy. Marcus looked at her, and something in his chest tightened. He had seen pain all his life. He had watched people weep, beg, scream, but Sarah's pain was different. It was quiet. It was deep. It had become part of her, the way darkness becomes part of night. Sarah. Marcus leaned down and gently took her hand. Small, cold, but he could feel the faint pulse beneath her skin. I am not Michael, he said, his voice low and certain. I am not your parents. I am not the good things that left you. When I say I will stay, I mean I will stay. Sarah looked at him, eyes full of doubt and full of hope. You do not know who I am. I know you are the mother of the bravest child I have ever met, Marcus answered. For me, that is enough. They sat in silence, hand in hand, while dawn slowly rose beyond the window. No more words were needed. No more promises had to be made, only the presence of each other, and the fragile belief that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. 2 weeks passed like a dream. Sarah was discharged on a bright, sun-filled morning, and instead of returning to that filthy apartment in a dangerous neighborhood, she was taken somewhere completely different. The new apartment sat in the safest part of the city, on the 12th floor of a high-end building with 24-hour security. 2 spacious bedrooms, a living room flooded with light, a balcony overlooking a green park below. Sarah refused when Marcus offered it. She said she could not accept, that she did not have money for the rent, that she did not want to owe anyone. But Marcus only looked at her with calm eyes and said this was not a gift. This was a guarantee of safety for her and Grace, and he would not accept no. Sarah did not have the strength to argue. Grace was the happiest of all. When she saw her mother step through the door of the new apartment, she ran into Sarah's arms and burst into sobs. Mommy, 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 she cried again and again, as if she feared that if she did not keep saying her mother's name, her mother would disappear. Sarah held her daughter, tears streaming down cheeks that were less swollen now, and whispered that she was here. She was not going anywhere, she promised. Marcus stood by the doorway, quietly watching mother and child reunite. He meant to turn away, to give them privacy. But Grace lifted her head and called to him, Uncle Marcus, why are you just standing there? Come in here with me and Mom. And so Marcus stepped inside, not as the Mafia boss, not as the man who saved their lives, not as any title at all, just Marcus, the man who had promised he would come back. In the days that followed, Marcus came by every day. At first, he only showed up to check that everything was all right, then left. But Grace would not allow it. She always found a way to keep him there. Uncle Marcus, stay for dinner with me. Uncle Marcus, teach me how to play cards. Uncle Marcus, help me with my homework. And Marcus, the man the whole city feared, could not say no to a 6-year-old girl. Dinner became a routine. Sarah cooked. Grace set the table. And Marcus sat there, awkward, not sure what to do with his hands, yet not wanting to leave. They ate together, talking about ordinary things Marcus had never had the chance to experience. About Grace's school, about the new job Sarah was looking for, about the cartoon Grace wanted to watch that weekend. Ordinary, warm, and strangely enough, Marcus found he loved those moments more than any deal or victory of his life. One evening, Grace demanded that Marcus teach her how to play cards. He agreed, confident he would easily beat a 6-year-old child. He was wrong. Grace won the first round, then the second, then the third. By the 5th game, Marcus started to wonder. Are you cheating? He asked, narrowing his eyes at her. Grace giggled, mischief shining on her face. No, you are just bad. Sarah sat beside them, trying not to laugh, and failing. Her laughter filled the apartment, bright and clear, and Marcus realized it was the first time he had heard her laugh like that. Another time, Grace asked Marcus to help with a math assignment. He sat down confidently, took the pencil, then frowned at the numbers on the page. First grade math, it should have been simple, but somehow, he got it wrong. Grace looked at his work, then at him, then back at the paper. "Uncle Marcus," she said, her voice so serious it was adorable. "I think you should let me do it myself." Sarah laughed until tears spilled from her eyes. Marcus sat there, face burning with embarrassment, wondering how a mafia boss could lose to a 6-year-old at both cards and math. 2 months passed. Sarah's wounds healed. Their lives began to settle, and Marcus still came every day, like a habit he did not want to break. One evening, after dinner, Grace fell asleep in her room. Sarah and Marcus sat on the balcony, looking out at the city lights shimmering below. A light wind moved through the night, carrying the first chill of autumn on its breath. "There is something I want to say to you," Marcus said, breaking the silence. Sarah turned to him, curious. "Are you leaving?" "No." Marcus shook his head. "The opposite. I want to stay." "You have stayed," Sarah said. "Every day. I want to stay forever." Sarah fell silent. Her heart began to beat faster, and with it came that familiar fear. The fear of being abandoned. The fear of losing what she loved. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you do not know what my life is. It is watching every good thing leave. It is being used to being left behind. I am afraid." She stopped, swallowing her tears. "I am afraid that one day you will leave too, like everyone else." Marcus took her hand and turned to face her. His eyes held hers, steady and honest. "I am not Michael. I am not your parents. I am Marcus Blackwood. And when I say forever, I mean forever." Sarah looked at him, searching for any hint of a lie in his eyes, but she found nothing except sincerity and hope. He did not look away. Then he leaned down and kissed her. Soft, gentle, like a promise that did not need words. Their first kiss, under the moonlight, on a balcony overlooking the city. 2 lonely souls finally found each other. 6 months later, Romano's was decorated like it had never been in all 40 years of its history. White flowers and pale pink roses were woven into graceful arches. Candles shimmered on every table, and at the end of the aisle, Marcus Blackwood stood in a black suit, trembling for the first time in his life over something that was not danger. It was a small, intimate wedding, only the closest people. Rosa stood in the front row, crying from the moment the ceremony began, and showing no sign of stopping. Victoria, Marcus's sister, beamed as if to say, "I told you so." Leo and Marcus's loyal men stood near the back, awkward in suits they were not used to wearing, but every one of them smiling. Then the restaurant doors opened, and Marcus stopped breathing. Sarah stepped inside, radiant in a simple but elegant white wedding dress. Her hair was pinned up, revealing the slender line of her neck and her delicate shoulders. Her face held no bruises now, only a smile and bright eyes fixed on Marcus. But what truly caught in Marcus's throat was the one leading her down the aisle. Grace. The little girl was 7, wearing white, holding a small bouquet, guiding her mother forward step by slow step. Her expression was solemn, as if she were carrying out the most important duty of her life. And maybe she was. When Sarah reached Marcus, when the elderly priest spoke the familiar words, when it came time to say their vows, Marcus took Sarah's hand and looked straight into her eyes. "I promise I will protect you and Grace with everything I have. I promise I will always come back, no matter what happens. I promise I will be the man worthy of the love you have given me." Sarah smiled, tears glimmering at the corners of her eyes. "I promise I will be the place you return to. I promise I will love you for everything you are, both the darkness and the light. I promise I will never stop believing in you." The priest was about to continue when a tiny voice piped up. "I promise too." The whole room turned to Grace. She stood between Marcus and Sarah, holding both their hands, her face so serious it was adorable. Marcus smiled and bent down to her. "What do you promise?" Grace thought for a moment, then declared, "I promise I will share my ice cream with Dad." Sometimes, the whole room burst into laughter. Even the toughest men in Marcus's crew could not hold it in. Rosa cried harder, but this time she was laughing through her tears. And Marcus, the mafia boss the city had once feared, laughed like he had never laughed before. 1 year later, their lives had changed completely. Marcus slowly withdrew from the underworld, handing the business to Leo and the people he trusted. He was no longer a mafia boss. He was simply Marcus, Sarah's husband, and Grace's dad. Sarah opened a small flower shop on a quiet street corner. She named it Grace, after her daughter, Every day she stood among fresh blooms, arranging bouquets that carried joy into other people's lives. And every evening, when the shop closed, she came home to the family waiting for her. Grace was 7 now, and she no longer called Marcus Uncle Marcus. Dad, Dad, Dad. Every time Marcus heard that, warmth spread through his chest in a way he had never known. One evening, Marcus sat in his office, staring at the family photo on his desk. In it, Sarah was smiling, Grace was making a silly face, and Marcus stood between them, looking like an entirely different man from the Mafia boss he once was. The phone rang. Leo calling, something that needed handling. Boss, it is urgent. We need you here now. Marcus looked at the clock. 6:45. Dinner at 7. He had promised Grace he would be home for dinner. Tomorrow, Leo, Marcus said. Tonight I have a date with my daughter. He ended the call, stood up, and walked out of his office, toward the home where 2 women were waiting for him, toward the life he had never dared to dream of. People often say strength comes from power, from money, from the fear you plant inside other people. But Marcus learned a different lesson. Real strength is not making others fear you. It is making sure the people you love never have to be afraid. That was the lesson a barefoot 6-year-old girl taught the most powerful Mafia boss in the city, and it was a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. Sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected moments. When your plans collapse, when a date turns into a rescue mission, when a stranger becomes family, when a child runs through the night and finds the very person waiting for her, without either of them even knowing it. The story of Marcus, Sarah, and Grace ends here, but the lesson they leave behind will echo forever. That love is not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. That family does not have to be bound by blood, but by those willing to sacrifice everything for one another. That no matter how dark your past is, you can still find light if you dare to open your heart to it. And what about you? How did this story touch your heart? Have you ever had an unexpected moment that changed your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We truly want to hear the stories that come from deep in your hearts. If you enjoyed this video, please press like and share it with the people you love. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the moving stories we share each day. We sincerely thank you for staying with us until the end of the video. We wish every one of you watching good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. Goodbye, and see you again in the next video.